People told tales of the river spirit who preserved the secrets of the water in a small village of Osema, where mist flowed over hills and the river rang through the night. However, there was one secret that the spirit kept even from herself, and that was the fact that she had a child born in the glimmer of moonlight and hidden among the humans. The people who lived in the village were aware of the spirit. They respected her, they feared her, and they even built offerings on the river bank. However, nobody had any suspicion that one of them might possess the river's magic. This was the story of Anya, a young girl who had been abandoned and possessed an intense stare that appears to penetrate the very essence of the river. When people began to vanish at the water's edge, everyone pointed the finger of accusation at Anya, and murmurs got stronger with every disappearance, with people rumoring, was she the kid of the spirit? What darkness lingered within her? The villagers were beginning to feel suspicious, and the secrets of Osema were about to come to surface. They were like stones that were hidden beneath the river, waiting for someone to investigate them further. For generations, the people who lived in Osema had maintained a harmonious relationship with the river. They honored it with rituals, throwing offerings into its depth, and it supplied them with fishes and fresh water. But one misty evening, Ola, the local herbalist, disappeared close to the river, and that peace became uncomfortable. His family discovered just his walking stick pushed against a rock where the river met the shore. It was said among the villagers that it was the spirit's doing, and that Ola must have violated some sacred law on purpose. However, there was more than just fear in the air. There was also suspicion. Anya, the orphan girl who lived with the elderly widow Tola, observed that the stares of the townspeople were becoming increasingly unfriendly towards her. Her eyes were always keeping a vigilant and silent gaze, and she had a peculiar habit of spending hours by herself by the river. She had been different for a long time. There were many who believed that she was a child of the river spirit, having been born from mist and water. She was under the impression that it was nothing more than a story. Nevertheless, as the distrust of the villagers grew more and more intense, she started to experience a pulling towards the river. It was as if the river was calling out to her, whispering in a language that only she could understand. There was a night when Anya was looking into the river, and she had the impression that she saw something, a face that was moving beneath the surface of the water. With a flicker of her eye, it vanished, leaving behind nothing but waves. She distanced herself from the river, her pulse racing, the terror mixed with a peculiar sensation that she was unable to identify, a feeling that the river held answers that she was not yet prepared to discover. The widow Tola, who had taken Anya in when she was a baby, observed the mounting fear that the girl was experiencing. She was a woman of few words, but she held many secrets, knowledge that had been passed on to her by her own mother a very long time ago. There was a particular occasion when she drew Anya closer to her and placed a wrinkled hand on her shoulder. "Stay away from the river," she said in a tone that communicated both gentleness and ferocity as she spoke. It has its ways and it keeps its own. Anya wanted to argue, to claim that the river was calling to her like a friend, but she controlled her tongue and refrained from doing so. Despite the fact that Tola had never disclosed the fact to her about her parents, she held Tola in high regard. People in the village believe I am cursed, right? Her voice was hardly audible, above a whisper, as Anya asked. Tola did not respond, but her silence was more powerful than any words she could have said. Anya noticed the old woman's eyes, which were filled with worry, and she also noticed a spark of something else. Fear. The suspicion, however, became even more pronounced when another villager, a little kid who frequently played near the river, vanished without a trace. It was then that the people began to gossip about the river's daughter, as well as the spirit's vengeance. After that, Anya started to question whether or not there was any truth to the story after all. She was able to sense a change occurring within her, much like a river that was flowing beneath the ground and building strength. One morning, Tola presented Anya with a silver amulet on a woven cord. "Wear this," she instructed, her voice shaking slightly. "It belonged to your mother." Anya's eyes widened in confusion. Tola had never mentioned her mother before, and now that she was handing her this relic, it felt as if she was passing on a secret that was as weighty as stone. The amulet had a warm sensation in her hand, and it seemed to be pulsating with life. Anya wrapped it around her neck and felt the weird warmth of it against her chest as she tried to put it on. When she was walking along the river with her amulet shining brightly in the sunlight, the locals made sure to keep a close eye on her. She had a feeling that the river was also watching her, silently communicating with her in a language that only her heart could understand. She could sense that it was urging her to approach it in order to uncover a secret that was concealed within its depth. The following morning, the town was shaken by yet another disappearance. Anya was referred to as a cursed child by an older person who had spoken out against her this time. Soon after, rumors began to circulate, with some individuals claiming that they had seen a shadow in the water or a hand reaching out before the elder disappeared, and once more everyone's attention directed at Anya. The people in the village had had enough. The candles were flickering in the darkness as they gathered along the riverbed, and their expressions were composed and determined. Anya could feel the weight of their looks on her, and as she stood alone, she felt a mix of anger and fear. How could they possibly hold her responsible for the unsolved mysteries of the river? She questioned. A man walked up to her, accusing her with a shaking voice. "Are you not the daughter of the river? We have been the victims of theft by your kind." Anya experienced a peculiar energy surge that swept through her as a result of the accusation, as if something deep within her was waking up. She experienced the warmth of the amulet, a presence that was both frightening and reassuring to her. Exactly at that moment, a figure appeared from the shadows. It was a stranger who was concealed by a cloak and had their face covered. When they reached the riverbed, they waited for a moment before throwing back the cloak, which revealed an elderly guy with eyes that were sharp and piercing. His voice could be heard wafting over the sea as he explained, "You are blaming the wrong one. The river conceals a great deal of information, and Anya is just one of them. The elderly man introduced himself as Abba, a storyteller from a faraway village. As he spoke, he mentioned an old agreement that had been made between the river spirit and the people of Osema, a promise that had been sealed in magic and mystery. The villagers listened in stunned silence as curiosity replaced their rage. The kid who was born from the depths of the spirit and sent among the people to learn their ways was described by Abba as a bridge between the river and the land. Anya felt something stirring within her as Abba's words sank over the crowd. It may have been a memory or it could have been a sensation that had been buried deep within her. She came to the realization that Abba was referring to her. However, how did he come to know her story? Abba cast a quick glance in her direction, and for a moment their eyes locked. Anya understood the questions that she had been keeping to herself for such a long time, and she saw a reflection of those inquiries in that glance. However, Abba was not yet finished. As he continued, he stated, "The river is restless because it has been betrayed. There is a curse on it, but Anya is not the one who brought the curse." When he turned his attention to the villagers, there was an abrupt halt in the conversation, as if every single person had stopped breathing. Anya was aware of the significance of his comment and had the impression that the mystery was not yet solved. Following the completion of Abba's story, the elders of the community met together to discuss what they had just heard. They were burdened down by Abba's remarks, but their suspicions continued to linger. They continued to argue well into the night, increasing and decreasing the volume of their voices as the torchlight flickered. There were still many people who wanted Anya to be banished because they were frightened that she might cause harm if she remained in the village. However, there were a few elders who believed that if Anya was in fact the river's daughter, then she might be their only chance of breaking the curse. They arrived at a conclusion in the end, which was that Anya would be given an opportunity to demonstrate that she was innocent. The only condition that would allow her to stay is if she was able to free the village from the curse and restore the river's safety. Anya listened attentively as Akuro, the head elder, made the presentation of their decision. Fear and rage caused her heart to pound rapidly. She had been born with the mystery of the river, which was a part of her that she did not yet fully understand. However, if she desired to be a part of the village, she would have to find out the truth. When daylight broke, Tola wrapped her arms around Anya securely and whispered words of comfort to her. "My child, I urge you to visit the river tonight. Seek the guidance of the spirit. Keep in mind that you are more powerful than you realize." Anya was able to feel the amulet warmth on her chest, which helped strengthen her. She had a clear understanding of what she needed to do. The following evening, Anya managed to sneak away from the village and made her way to the river by herself. As she got closer, the moonlight danced across the surface of the water, and the river seemed to be almost alive, moving and rippling as she got closer. As she sat down by the waterside, her pulse was pounding, and she whispered, "Spirit of the river, if you are my mother, reveal yourself to me." At that moment, the water came to a halt, and a person emerged from the depth. The figure appeared to be translucent, and it was a woman with eyes as deep as the riverbed and hair that resembled flowing water. When Anya stared into those eyes, she found that they were a reflection of her own, and her breath stopped. When the spirit spoke, her voice was gentle but commanding. My child, I have been keeping a watchful eye on you from afar. I entrusted you to Tola so that she could protect you, because there are those who might consider using our connection against us. Aya could feel tears in her eyes. For as long as she could remember, she has fantasized about getting to know her mother. But this was beyond anything she could have imagined. She questioned in a shaky voice, why are people disappearing? The spirit's face darkened. I am not the one who takes them, she said. Something older and more dangerous than I am even capable of controlling is lurking in the waters, and it is a darkness that is waiting to be discovered. When Anya heard her mother's comment, she felt a chill run down her spine. Something ancient and wicked was present in the river, and it was evident to everyone. How can we stop it? She questioned. The expression on the spirit's face was gloomy. If you want to put an end to the curse, you will need to locate the point where the shadow penetrated the river. However, you should be aware that it will attempt to entangle you and draw you into its depth. You have to make sure that your head is clear and that your heart is strong. Aya returned to the village with a heavy heart. She informed Tola of her mother's warning, and Tola appeared to be very concerned, but proud of her. There is one place near the river that has always felt strange, Tola explained. The Willow Hollow, where the trees have become twisted and dark from their growth. Even back when I was a child, people were saying that it was cursed. Despite the fact that she was filled with terror, Anya was aware that this was the location she had to go to. At the break of dawn, before the villagers awakened, she would walk by herself and confront whatever was hidden within the gloomy hollow. Anya arrived at the Willow Hollow just as the first rays of sunlight began to creep over the hills and brighten the scenery. It was creepy, and the only sound that could be heard was the rustle of the twisted branches that were hanging above. The air had a dense quality, as if it were concealing 1,000 secrets that were not being said. A river that was dark and sluggish, almost black in color, flowed through the middle of the forest. Anya clenched her hands around the amulet that belonged to her mother and closed her eyes. She heard a voice as she knelt by the river. It was a frightening whisper that was barely audible but could be heard coming from the water. At the same time, the voice mocked her by referring to her as the spirit-forgotten child. Refusing to be scared, Anya stilled herself. She was dragged into the depths of the ocean by a hand that suddenly emerged from the water. The hand was black and scarred. Anya struggled to free herself from the shadow's hold, but she had the impression that it was also attempting to take hold of her spirit. When she was about to give up, she suddenly became aware of her mother's voice echoing in her head, and the warmth of the amulet began to heat up on her chest. She let out a scream, and a brilliant light suddenly erupted from her, causing the shadow to flee back into the river. Anya gasped as she stumbled back to the shore. Even though she had managed to break free, she was aware that the shadow was still hiding and waiting for another opportunity. The fact that she had to go back to the village filled her with fear, as she was unsure whether or not the people there would believe what she had witnessed. When Anya returned back to the village, she found Abba waiting beside Tola's house. The expression on his face was one of gloom, and she noticed a fatigue in his eyes that she had not noticed before. As he gestured to Anya to have a seat, Tola came out of the house to sit with them, a worried expression clearly visible. Abba began by saying, "The curse that has been placed on the river is older than any of us. A very long time ago, when Osema was a settlement, there was a man who aspired to have authority over the spirits around the lake. As a result of his greed and his desire to acquire power, he performed a spell that bound the river spirits, therefore trapping an evil spirit inside the waters. However, after his death, the spirit and the shadow continued to exist, bound to each other by the evil magic that he had created." As she listened, Anya was filled with terror as she came to the realization that the darkness she had encountered was a remnant of an ancient curse. This caused her voice to shake as she turned to Abba. "What will happen to my mother?" In response, Abba stated, "The curse will only be lifted if the spell is broken, and in order to accomplish that, we require something that is both powerful and self-sacrificing, something that you, a child, are the only one who can provide." Having a clear understanding of what she needed to do, Anya took a deep breath. She would make one final trip to the river, and this time she would not be terrified of what she would see there. With her amulet firmly in her hand, she made her way to the riverbed and once again called out to her mother. Whenever the spirit made its appearance, Anya experienced an overwhelming feeling of both love and despair. After saying her farewells in a low voice, she put the amulet into the river, offering it as a bridge to break the spell that had been cast. Suddenly, the river began to shine, and the darkness vanished in a flash of light, leaving the water calm and clear. Her mother smiled, a look of pride and contentment appearing on her face, and then she disappeared back into the depths, finally free. With the curse lifted, Osema was once again safe. Anya's return was met with awe and respect by the villagers, who no longer saw her as a threat, but rather as the person who saved them. However, Anya was unable to shake the feeling that her story was not even close to being finished. Although she was looking into the river, she couldn't help but wonder, would the spirit ever come back to her? Do you think she was still linked to the river, or did she now have the ability to shape her own destiny? Is it possible that there are further mysteries that are concealed within the depths of Osema's sea, just waiting to be discovered? As she gazed into the river, she couldn't help but wonder, would the spirit, her mother, ever return to her? Let us know in the comments section. Thank you.